my God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night you hear my voice, but I find no relief. Do you know what it means to lament? To lament something? We have a book in the Bible called Lamentations, but have we ever thought through what it means to truly lament? Author N.T. Wright is perhaps the most prolific theologian of our time, and he writes an article on lamenting for Time magazine that I'll attach to the link in the email that is sent out today. In that article, he writes this: "Perhaps what we need more than anything is to recover the biblical tradition of lament. Lament is what happens when people ask why and don't get an answer. Lament is what happens when people ask why and don't get an answer." You know, it's Wednesday of Holy Week. So far this week, we've been focusing on Jesus quoting Psalm 22, verse 1 while hanging on the cross. We've been looking at him asking, "Why, God? Why did you abandon me? Why stay so far away when I groan for help?" Now, it's right for us to focus on Christ saying these things, asking these things, especially during Holy Week, especially during the week that we focus on the story of the Passion of the Christ, sacrificing his life, ending up hanging on a cross. But today, I'd like to shift our focus away from Christ on the cross and put our focus on this psalm that Jesus quotes. You know, I mentioned yesterday that Psalm 22 was part of the prayer book that the Israelites would use. It was part of their regular liturgical prayers. Now, even though the 22nd Psalm is so often spoke of as a prophetic psalm, and in several aspects it is, because several of the things it mentions came true in the hours surrounding Christ's time on the cross. Even though there are prophetic elements in this psalm, it is important for us to realize that Psalm 22 was a prayer recited by the Israelite people for hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus quoted it on the cross. I actually love what one author writes. He says, "The psalm isn't a prophecy in the sense of a passage that says, one day there'll be a Messiah to whom this happens. It's a prayer for the Israelites to pray when they need to. So it is hugely encouraging because it gives permission to acknowledge their sense of abandonment and their fears without shame." This 22nd Psalm gave permission to the Israelites to cry out to God, to ask the why questions when they didn't understand why God would allow certain things to happen to them. The prayer of Psalm 22 gave permission to lament. I mean, friends, let's face it. Evil is rampant in the world around us. Bad things happen every single day. God may not cause the evil. He may not cause the bad things to happen, but he often allows it, which, by the way, is one of the greatest arguments people have against God, that he doesn't stop all evil. So when evil happened, when bad things happened to the Israelite people, when unexplained circumstances took place, having a prayer like Psalm 22 in their prayer book gave them freedom, even encouragement to go before Yahweh in all of their hurt, all of their pain, all of their sorrow. It gave them permission to lament. Why? God, why? And the Jewish people, they recognized that God didn't just give them good things because they were his children. They recognized both good and bad happened to everyone. One of their greatest prophets, Jeremiah, said this in the book of Lamentations: "Does not the Most High send both calamity and good?" Jesus himself, a good and devout Jew, taught in the Sermon on the Mount that God gives sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 45. So it's not like the Israelites were only expecting fields full of flowers and cotton candy and unicorns. They were not expecting lives only filled with joy, peace, love, and harmony. In the times that life stunk, where it was tremendously difficult, where unexplainable things happened to them, Psalm 22 gave permission to lament, to wail, to cry, to ask, why, God, why? And the Israelites could pray that without feeling like they needed to gloss over their pain. Friends, let me tell you what, I think we, Christians today, tend to gloss over the pain. We tend to churchify hard things. We give pat and cliche answers when we and others are going through difficult times. We don't allow ourselves and other Christians who are hurting to hurt. We don't give hurting people, ourselves included, the space we need to hurt. With our curt and cliche answers, we don't allow each other to process the pain with the Father who feels it more deeply than we ever could. When bad things, hard things, challenging things happen, we say things like, God must have a plan. God will use this for good since you love him. This too shall pass. Now these answers may be true, but I think Psalm 22 gives us today permission not to say those things, but instead to yell, God, why? This is terrible. I hate it. I don't want to go through it. I can't understand why you are allowing me to trudge through this valley. Commentator John Goldengay writes this: God did not make the world a place where he would be continually stopping people from doing wrong to one another. Maybe you think God should have made the world that kind of place, but God did not do so. God did not do so. Sometimes God intervenes, often God doesn't. The presence of Psalm 22 in the Psalter as a prayer for people to makes it possible for us to ask why and to utter our protest. The fact that Jesus takes up the question encourages us to assume that we can ask it too. Friends, this is why I keep pushing us this week to think through the why questions that we have. And not just to think about them, but to be willing to ask God the whys, to utter our protest against God, to lament without answers. Sure, Jesus screamed out Psalm 22 verse 1 on the cross in the hour of his greatest need, but we cannot forget that he was praying what his ancestors had prayed for generations. He was praying what we need to be willing to pray. Why? God, why? I don't understand. I don't agree. And you, Father, need to hear that from me. I'm simply doing what your Son demonstrating. I'm asking why too. I've been saying since Monday that God most likely won't answer the whys of your hearts this week. Sure, he could, but if he hasn't yet, my guess is he still won't. Lamenting, truly lamenting, allows us to be okay with God not answering. Today, we've reached the point in the week where I want to ask us to start asking our why questions. So far, I've just said be thinking about the questions. Today, I want you to begin asking. I've encouraged you to read Psalm 22 each day this week. Today, after you read it, take a few minutes to sit quietly. Allow the raspy scream, the roar that has been slowly building up within you to reach the surface. Ask God, ask the Father one or two of your deepest why questions, and then just sit there with him. Even if it feels like he isn't there, even if it feels like he won't answer, ask the questions. Lament today. Our spiritual ancestors asked why. Jesus asked why. We can ask why. I go back to the same quote that N.T. Wright said that I began the video with. Perhaps what we need more than anything is to recover the biblical tradition of lament. Lament is what happens when people ask why and don't get an answer. First Church, I'll be praying for you today. I'll be praying for all of us today. Psalm 22, verse 1 and 2. My God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night you hear my voice, but I find no relief.